Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking some seriously thought-provoking ideas from Imtinan Ahmad about finding our purpose in this crazy digital age. We're going to be looking at his perspectives on faith, digital culture, and even modern parenting. So let's just jump right in.
Okay, so let's tackle this core question right out of the gate. Does wealth actually lead to a loss of faith? This whole discussion was sparked by some recent research projecting a massive rise in atheism among wealthier populations by the year 2025. It really makes you wonder, right? As a society gets richer and more technologically advanced, do we just naturally drift away from spiritual belief?
To put this data into perspective, the research claims that populations in countries where the average annual income is under $5,000 tend to hold on to a much higher belief in God. And, the immediate assumption people make here, and it's an assumption that gets heavily scrutinized in our source material, is that poverty breeds this sort of fear, and that fear is what keeps people anchored to religion. On the flip side, the thinking goes that if you've got abundant resources and education, you just don't feel like you need a higher power anymore.
But Imtinan completely challenges that direct correlation. He argues that true faith has absolutely nothing to do with your financial status. He points back to historical Islamic figures, like Abdurrahman bin Auf, for example, who possessed literally staggering amounts of wealth, but still maintained an unshakable faith. The argument here is that boiling human spirituality down to just economic desperation, well, that's just a totally flawed way of looking at it.
So the counter-argument is that deeply rooted belief isn't just born from the fear of poverty, and it certainly isn't destroyed just because you have a healthy bank account. It actually stems from a profound existential understanding. According to the source, God tests people through both extremes. You can be tested through the intense struggles of poverty, for sure, but also through the massive distractions of wealth. It's a test of character, not your tax bracket.
Now, shifting gears to our digital lives, Ahmad radically redefines this concept of modern Satanism. And now, he isn't talking about occult rituals or crazy movie tropes. He argues that today, it's actually the everyday systematic distraction we all face. It's that relentless comparison on social media, the illusion of supremacy, that constant endless scrolling just to prove to yourself, hey, I am better than him. It's a system literally designed to keep us totally distracted from our true purpose.
And he makes this really provocative comparison that kind of blew my mind. He says modern influencers are basically running their own broadcast like false prophets. I mean, think about it. Historically, prophets had vast followings, right? Today, you've got an influencer sitting in their bedroom, commanding an audience of anywhere from 70,000 to 7 million people. They're actively dictating worldviews, moralities, and lifestyles to the masses. It is a wildly fascinating lens to view our social media landscape through.
Which brings us to this massive, glaring contradiction in modern society. On one hand, we've got something like 4 billion people connected online. We are living in the most hyper-connected era in all of human history. But on the other hand, the US Surgeon General recently highlighted that we are suffering from a literal pandemic of loneliness. How crazy is that? We have endless connection right at our fingertips, yet the average person feels more isolated than ever before.
The reality is our digital environment is meticulously engineered to distract us. We're trapped in this vicious cycle of constant comparison. We end up chasing these fleeting 15-minute bursts of happiness. Maybe it's buying a new gadget online, getting a bunch of likes, or even just eating a burger, only to crash right back into emptiness. The source points out that society has essentially replaced deep spiritual truths with a super watered-down secular concept of just good versus bad. We're replacing our ultimate purpose with sheer, unadulterated materialism. And that leads us to a really critical existential realization. Imtinan points out that if our only goal in life is to build up 100-year wealth plans, hoard properties our kids won't even live in, and stockpile food, well, functionally, we're really no different than animals hunting and gathering just to survive. Even a bird manages to secure its daily food, If mere survival and hoarding resources is the absolute ceiling of our ambition, we have fundamentally missed the point of what makes us human. Which brings up the most important question we could possibly ask.
The source borrows that famous Mark Twain quote to really drive this point home. The two most important days in your life are the day you are born and the day you find out why. Finding out that why, the actual reason we were placed in this world, way beyond just paying bills and buying stuff, that is the paramount question. Imtinan argues that this is the exact question that should literally be keeping us awake at night.
Now, this search for meaning brings up a pretty stark generational divide, especially when it comes to parenting. See, millennials and older generations, they often just accepted rules blindly. We didn't ask questions, mostly out of fear of upsetting our elders, right? But Gen Z and Gen Alpha are completely different. They are actively demanding philosophical answers.
They want to know the why behind absolutely everything, and they completely refuse to just accept things because that's how it's always been done.
Now, it's super easy for older folks to look at that questioning nature and write it off as rebellion or disrespect. But Imtinan actually sees the curiosity of these younger generations as a massively positive trait. They should be asking these hard questions. The actual crisis, he warns, is that parents and guardians are completely failing to provide the existential guidance and the deep answers these young minds desperately need right now. The youth aren't the problem here. Our lack of preparation is.
So how do we fix this? How do we properly guide them? The source introduces this really powerful three-pronged framework for imparting knowledge. We usually think school is enough, but it's really not. The framework goes like this. Number 1, education, which is your standard formal knowledge. Number 2, exposure, which means actively engaging with the real physical world around us. And number 3, experience, which comes from genuinely living through life's challenges rather than just being shielded from them.
Let's look a bit closer at how we actually provide this exposure and experience. First off, it means reducing screen time, not as a punishment, but to actually allow for real-world observation. The source notes that so many kids today have literally never watched a sunrise from a rooftop or felt the morning dew. Parents really need to facilitate those physical experiences. And when your kids ask those incredibly tough questions like, "Where is God?" don't dodge them. If you don't know the answer, be radically honest. Just say, "You know what? I don't know. Let's research and think critically about this together."
Now, if you're feeling a little overwhelmed by all this, the source offers a really reassuring takeaway. Parents do not need to have all the answers instantly memorized. That's an impossible standard. Actually, your true job as a parent is simply to provide that initial spark. You are there to ignite a lifelong search for truth, to show them that seeking meaning is a worthy, absolutely essential pursuit. You aren't just handing them answers, you're teaching them how to find them.
As we wrap up this explainer, we've covered a huge amount of ground today. From the true nature of wealth and the trap of digital distraction, all the way to the existential curiosity of the next generation. But it all circles back to one core theme. So I want to leave you with the exact same existential challenge presented in our source material. What is your ultimate purpose? What is your why? Take a little time away from the screens today to really think about it. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and remember to keep asking the big questions.